Dave here, and welcome to the channel. Welcome to a live stream. And sitting out on my front porch, just got done raining outside. It's a little sticky, but it's quiet. The birds are singing in the background. You probably hear maybe the dogs might be barking in the backyard, traffic driving by. But I just kind of figured I was going to sit out here, hang out for a bit, and talk about some of the games that I play and why, and interact with you guys is to, and see what see some of the things that you guys are playing and why. And so this whole thing kind of came across from a discussion that I had today with a guy named Joe Cards, who's a guy that I'm becoming friends with. We talked on the phone today. He's from New York, and and I'm from the Chicago area, so it's a little bit of a distance. But he runs a couple of he runs a Facebook page that has to do with card and dice sports games, and I was talking about one of the things that came up is, why do we play the games that we play, or how did we end up playing them, or or what makes us gravitate towards certain things. And this kind of stemmed off of a podcast episode that I listened to on the Digital to Dice podcast. In the most recent episode, they were talking about "I Can't Quit You." It was like a game, and they can't, when they're stuck on a game, and they started talking about certain games that just resonate with people. And so I figured, I've had a YouTube channel for over 10 years, and I don't think I've ever done a video or a discussion or hanging out talking about the games that I play and why, or even like how I even got started. So hobby gaming for me really didn't start until I had kids. When I was a kid and growing up, we'd play games, but it was a typical like what you bought from the store. And so we would play stuff like Clue and Monopoly, and I always liked the game Payday. And there was a couple card games that we would play. We had a game called Racco, and I remember playing that. My dad loved Racco, and we used to sit there and we'd play that in the kitchen. And then of course we play like Uno, and then occasionally there would be like Skip-Bo would come around and stuff like that. But those are pretty much like the games that we played. And I remember the first, what I would consider like hobby game, was a game called Scotland Yard, which is now, I think it's still around, and it's a hidden movement game where you're trying to find Mr. X, and as he moves around the board, he leaves traces of where he was, like what type of transportation. Did he take a taxi? Did he take a train, the underground? Different things like that, a bus, and then so that was like the first time that I had actually like a hobby game. I didn't even know it was a hobby game until it came out years later that it won the Spiel des Jahres, which I had no idea what that was. I just knew it was like, I found out that was an award, and like, oh, well, this one won back then. I'm like, that's pretty cool. And then I had, and I kind of dabbled in role-playing games. I remember like the first editions of Dungeons and Dragons had come out, and I had played that with some friends, like school friends and stuff like that. And then just over time, I grew up and just wasn't really like the time and sitting down and playing games and stuff like that wasn't really like in it for me. I was, busy doing other things. I was working on school. I was working, jobs and stuff like that. So it didn't really, resonate to sit there and play games, because I would be busy with doing other things. And so playing games was more so like, just like extra time that I didn't really have to spend. And then, so let's fast forward a little ways until, I got married, and we had kids, and my kids were growing up. This is probably like around 2011, 2012. And the kids started dabbling. They would get like Pokemon cards and things like that. And then they started buying cards for a game called Magic the Gathering. And they didn't know how to play, and I didn't know how to play. I didn't know anything about the game. And so there was a local game store literally in my town, like 5 minutes from me, that we stopped in there and figured, hey, can somebody teach the kids like how to play Magic the Gathering? And think there were some people that were kind of giving them the basics or gave them a couple of intro decks to try to figure out how things were. And I was browsing the store and I see all these different types of games, and I'm like, I never knew that this world existed. To me, the games that I knew that you could buy were in your big box stores, or if you went to like the toy store, like if you went to Toys R Us or maybe like KB Toys, like those were the stores that I knew of. That's where you would buy games and you'd buy board games. I didn't know anything about the whole world that was in there. I think maybe I remember now, when I was a teenager, there was some kids on the block and we played Fortress America and Axis and Allies, but I had no idea that those would be considered like hobby style games now. But they were fun. We would get together and sit we'd get over to this guy Scott's house and we would play in his family room. We'd have the game set up, and I remember Fortress America. Everybody's trying to attack America, and America's got to repel everybody. And then Axis and Allies, you had certain teams that were trying to defeat each other. And and I remember, and now it's like I sit there and see that those games are still around, especially like Axis and Allies. But there's all sorts of different variations of it and things like that. So, but those were some of the early memories, and like I said, it wasn't until later on that my eyes were open to all of these different things. And so I started investigating. I'm like, what are these? Like, what types of games are these? You can actually do things like it wasn't like I remember the games when I was growing up. It would be like you were kind of along for the ride, especially like Payday. I remember you roll the dice and you move, and whatever shows up, that's what happens. It's like, okay, today was you have to pay the taxes, so you have to pay $25. Or hey, somebody dropped off a package in the mail and it was there was money inside and it's worth $50. And so you just rolled, and that was kind of how it went. Those games were, you didn't really make any decisions. So I kind of felt like, okay, we would play games at past time. Then I encounter these games where it's like, wow, you actually have to do something. You can make decisions, and what you decide to do is going to affect the outcome of the game. It wasn't just luck. I think now I think back on one of the games where you actually had to do some thought process of games growing up was the game Clue, and I still play Clue, and that was a good deduction game, but that was still for the most part you'd roll the dice, you'd move. Okay, I have to get in this room so that I can ask a question. But there was some strategy there, but it wasn't like the things that we have now. And so I remember one of the first games that I had bought was a game called Dungeon, and it was like kind of set in a fantasy theme, and you had to go around in this dungeon and explore it, and I did it with my kids. And then another silly game, that one of the first games that I played was a game called Flux, and playing in Flux, there was all right, there we go. So anyways, so playing the game Flux, which was just silly fun, but that was like you just play, whatever. The rules change. Whatever you start off, you draw, like if the rule is draw a card, play a card. And then all of a sudden you can change the rules where it's like, oh, draw 3 cards and play 1, or draw 1 card and play 3, and then you're trying to have like certain types of goals, and it was just completely by luck that you would end up winning with Flux. It's like you have certain cards in front of you called keepers, and when things show up, it's like, oh hey, I won, or you happen to have certain keepers, and then you can change the goal, and then it's like, oh, I win. And so that was kind of interesting. But then I kind of came across a game. It was like a deck building game, and I never even knew what a deck building game was, but it was set in the DC universe. It was called the DC deck building game. And over the course of that game, you start off with a very, very basic deck of cards. Everybody starts off with the same, and then they generate a currency, and they're called power. And you can use power to do different things. You can use it to fight the bad guys, or you can use your power to buy better cards out of this market to put into your deck. And over the course of the game, your deck gets better and better and better, because every time that you buy a card, it goes into your discard pile. And then when you play through you play all your cards in your hand, and they go into a discard pile, and you draw new cards. And then once you go through your whole draw pile, you shuffle up your discard pile and you go through it again. And so that was my first like exposure to like a real strategy game, because then I would be looking like, okay, what cards do I want to add to my deck? What's going to give me the advantage? What do I want to be able to have cards that are going to give me more power? Do I want to have more cards that are going to allow me to draw more cards so I can have bigger hands? Are there things that are just going to, work off of each other? And so I was like, wow, I can actually look and make a decision. Like I have to decide, like, oh, I want to get this type of card. And so ever since then, I've really been drawn to like deck building games because that whole idea of that construction, like I always like to build things. When I was a kid, Legos was huge for me. I'd just sit there and I would have tons and tons and tons of sets of Legos. And not only did I build the stuff that, the instructions when they came, and I would play with those, but then later on I would take them all apart and I would build my own things and we would do all sorts of stuff. And so there's always been like that kind of construction thing that's been a part of me. And maybe that's why in my occupation, I work in construction. I'm an electrician. And so that probably kind of goes along with that. And so that really kind of got me into like the whole idea of this deck building and constructing and doing things where you can make things better, try and make things work together and have different combinations of things. And so over time, I've encountered several deck building games, and there's certain ones that I like, and there's other ones that have kind of passed along. I still do play the DC deck building game. That was the first one that I got, and in terms of like a deck building game now, it's very, very basic, which just that one currency, just that generating power, and I think it's a great game to introduce somebody to a hobby style game where you're actually doing things, and it's got a cool theme. And so I still play that, but I have a number of deck building games in my collection that I now play. And then just through the design process, there are designers that have come out there that they do different things where they use now, instead of just the whole game being built upon building up a deck, playing the cards, defeating this stack of bad guys, and then that's all you're done. To now they use the deck building as a supplement to other things that go on in the game. So, for example, there's a game that I like to play called Clank. And in Clank, you have a little guy that you have to move down into this dungeon, and you're trying to explore it, and you're trying to find a relic and get back out before everybody else. Well, the cards that you use, you need to have certain cards that have little footprints on there, because those are going to allow you to move. So you're looking for cards that are going to allow you to move. There's other things that give you like little swords because you need to be able to fight bad guys, otherwise you take damage. There's other things that allow you to draw more cards, and there's all sorts of different things that you're specifically looking for in the market of cards to add to your hand so that you could play them to be able to do things on your turn, on a board. And so I thought that was like, wow, this is fantastic. And so there's a few games that are like that, and two of the games that I really, really enjoy are from the same designer, Paul Dennen, and he's the one who did Clank, and there's like several different variations of it. Now the most recent one is Clank Catacombs, which I really enjoy. It has a modular board, and tiles rotate, and so the dungeon changes as you're playing. It's really cool. And then another game is called Dune Imperium, and that one you're looking for specific cards because you need to play a card in order to be able to put workers in specific spaces on your board. And so, like I said, I'm really drawn to that type of game. And so deck building games always been like one of my favorites, and I think that's why I just like the idea of building stuff, constructing something, putting things together. And so that's one of the styles of games that I really enjoy playing. And the other style of game, now, going back to when I started playing games, I got a chance to play some games. There was a game called Lords of Waterdeep. And it's a game, it's called, the style of game is called a worker placement game. And so what you have is little workers, and they would be considered markers. And as you're playing the game, on your turn, you will place a worker into a space, and then whatever that action is in that space, whether it's gathering a resource or doing something else, that's what you're able to do. And essentially you block off that space so nobody else can go there that particular round. And so you're strategizing like, okay, well, what does somebody else need? Like, what do I need? What's my priority, and where do I need to go to first? And go there and get the things that you need. And then later on, you're making, and as the spaces are filling up from all the different workers that are out there. Sorry, cat that's running around here. The other, as the spaces are filling up, now you're like, okay, well, what's the next best thing that I need to do. So then you're trying to optimize your rounds, and by putting things in the right in spaces that you go to. And so I can't really put a finger on like why I like to play those. It's just something that it's just like the whole idea of, maybe it's the idea of like, I'm reserving this space. I get to do this round and you don't. Or prioritizing my actions. What do I want to do first with what's available? And so I gravitate towards those types of games. And those, some of my favorite games are in my collection have that type of mechanic as well. So like deck building games and also the worker placement games. Those are my favorite games. And so I was trying to think about like why do I gravitate towards those? And so like I said, I think the building aspect would be for the worker placement games. And then and then I started thinking about some of the other types of games that I play, and I started to enjoy like drafting games. I never even knew what a drafting game was but there's several games where you're drafting cards, and a perfect example is a game called Seven Wonders, where you're trying to build up a civilization, and it goes over 3 ages. And you start off with a hand of 7 cards, and you're looking at them, and you're like looking at what's the most useful for you to be able to build. You have a wonder that's in front of you. What are you trying to do with that? What are some other things that maybe you're going to prioritize for your turn? Are you going to build up military? Are you going to build up and do a lot of scientific research? Are you trying to build a bunch of different like statues and buildings in your civilization? And all the different cards that those types of things all are related to a specific color of card that you can draft and you can play. And so you would select a card, and then you pass them to the player to your left or your right. And I didn't understand like how that worked as I was playing. Like the first couple times of playing, I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I'm not really sure. And but later on, like the more that I played it, I realized like, okay, I need this, I need this. The cards come to me, and I'm like, okay, what's useful? I can do a couple different things with this. But if I pass these cards to my neighbor, there's really something that they could use, and I may not necessarily want to get them. So can I use it for myself, or can I use it to do something? And sometimes there's like a bunch of good cards, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to take what I need, and Merry Christmas, here you go, have some stuff. And so, but the idea there of selecting things and putting it together, that's the type of stuff that really gets me. That gets me going, gets the wheels turning. And so those are so I think that's why I like to play those games. Um, I've done some other like there's other types of games that are out there that I do enjoy, but it's kind of I can't put my finger on why I like them. So one of them is a game called Power Grid, and it has a lot to do with like auctions and a lot of like money management. And it's all economics because you have a market of resources. It's all driven by supply and demand. And I'm not really like a numbers guy, but for some reason that one I like to play that one. So, and I guess the other thing, going back to like my topic, it's like what we play and why. I dabbled in a bunch of different types of things. I dabbled in like some miniatures games, and so like some of the card trading card games and stuff, and just those just didn't sit well with me. The trading card games just becomes like a very expensive, like it's a money pit. uh you spend a bunch of money to buy packs of these cards. Most of them are duplicates. They have no value. You don't need them. And then the rare ones, the super rare that you can't ever find, those are the ones that the professional players are using to build their decks, and then everybody is copying those. And they cost a lot of money, and it just becomes like a money game. Like, okay, well, if you want to win, you have to spend a lot of money to get the cards that you need to be able to put things together for you to do. And even though I mentioned about that I like to build things like the deck building games, I don't particularly care about, or I don't like what would be considered like a deck construction game, where I actually have to take the deck of cards that I'm going to play with, I actually have to assemble. I have to put those all together, figure out which ones work together, put those all in the proper combination. Like, okay, do I want to have? I can have up to 3 in this deck. Do I want to have all 3 of those? Do I want to have 3 copies? Do I want 2? Do I want to have other things? I just didn't like that. Played a couple of like miniatures games, and that was just very, very difficult to be able to play because I didn't have a player base of folks to play it with. There would be organized play events and people come out of the woodwork to play, but then once that little tournament or that little league was over, it was like the stuff just sat on the shelf. And after a while, I'm like, you know what? I'm sick of the tired of this stuff sitting around. And I ended up getting it. I'm like, I just stuck primarily with my board games. And so most recently, and you've seen me like some posting up some comments about like or some videos talking about the sports simulation games and why we play those I was talking to like I said, I was talking to Joe Cards today on the phone, and I just asked him because he was really big into Stratomatic baseball. That was one of the games that he plays. And I asked him, I said, why, how did you get into that? And he said that he was introduced to that because originally his dad had him playing the Cadico or Kadako baseball game with the spinner and stuff. And he said he still has that, at home. And I thought that was kind of cool. And so I think that you just sometimes you play games because that's all you know, or that's what you grew up on, and you just have an affinity for stuff. And so for me, I kind of found that you kind of gravitate towards certain things, and I'll play those like certain sports because I know them or I played them. And I kind of find like with some of the sports stuff, the games, why, what do I play and why? Um, I look for ones that I can build a narrative off of as I play them out. Something that where I'm not hung up on statistics and stuff like that. I never really was. I never was like a super athletic kid. Like growing up, I played little league baseball for 4 years. Um, I could field like anybody. I was just a terrible hitter. I just had a very, very low batting average. I don't even know what it was, but I didn't, I just, for some reason, hand-eye coordination, I just was not very good with swinging a bat. And so that was probably a weakness for me, but I played baseball, um, for 4 years. Actually all 4 years we played, the teams that I was on came in first place. So I did something to contribute to us doing well. And then I played basketball for 1 year when I was in sixth grade, and that was a complete train wreck because it just came down to the other kids that played. They were all friends, and the one kid, his dad was the coach, and so he played him and played all of his friends. And since I wasn't really in the group, I didn't really get a chance to play. And I guess which is fine. I wasn't really ever really that great at basketball anyways. But now it's like I could sit there and play I can play those games, and I'm able to put that aside as I'm familiar, at least familiar with the games. And not so much like I really don't care that much about basketball. But I've kind of become really like I really enjoy hockey, and I think maybe the more so the reason that I like hockey is because I'm jealous of the players because I could ice skate a little bit, but only forward, never backwards. And I'm still amazed that these guys can do the things that they do while riding around on a blade of steel. Totally. And in addition to turning, going backwards, forwards, making quick cuts, stuff like that, being bumped into, not without falling down all the time, being able to fight while on blades of steel, it just that amazes me. And then I just love the whole idea of that particular game. So like I kind of gravitate towards those particular kind of sports. And then I play the ones, like I said, the ones that have the narrative, that or I could build a story out in my mind as I'm playing it. It's like it doesn't. I may not even know who the players are. I don't care. I don't. So I'll look off a name. Some of them I know who they are because if I play like if it's older stuff, well, like from when I was a kid, and I remember those particular players, then in my mind I can imagine that out. And so and I play that, and then and that kind of gives me this little bit of like an escape, or kind of the ability to go back in the past, and kind of try to relive my youth, because I think that's kind of one of the things of what we do. I mean, one of the reasons probably why we all play games is to have a little bit of a escape from all the stuff that goes on in our lives. And I know that different people, use this hobby and play games for different reasons to escape. Some of it is like, if you can do things that, you can act out things in games and stuff like that, may overcome like some sort of a disability that you have in your real life. Sometimes you use it to mask pain and suffering that you have going on in your life. And it's like, when you need to just kind of essentially come up for air because you've got so much other stuff that's going on, and then you can dive into these different worlds, whether it's in the real world, and you're reliving sports, or you're living in a fantasy world, where you can be some kind of a wizard, or you decide for some reason that you want to go back and you're a trader in the Mediterranean, or you're exploring space. All of those different things that you can do, allows you to, it's a great, I think that's probably one of the reasons why we'll find certain things like that, because it's, it, it gives us that break from reality. Um, so anyways, back to the types of games and that we play and why. If you were to look at my collection, the most of my themes, the theming that I have is probably based on something that would be considered real or historical. So like a lot of my games would be like farming games, or would be like your traders in the Mediterranean type thing, trading in the Mediterranean. I have a few fantasy games, but it's not really my thing. I'm not really into like elves and dwarves and wizards and all that stuff. I mean, I have some games that you can do that stuff with, but that's not primarily what I'm drawn to. I guess it's like I don't really like kind of gravitate towards that type of fantasy. And I'm not a big, huge science fiction guy outside of, I mean, I used to love Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars is my favorite movie of all time. But I don't have very many games that have like a space theme. Because I don't really find like, going out and exploring the cosmos is not really what gives me a break from reality. Um, I think that a lot of when I went back to like the whole myself of being like, constructing things and stuff like that, really goes back to like those builders or farming or stuff like that. It just has to do with like that kind of working, that those are the types of themes that I can kind of immerse myself in, because um, I guess that I'm building things, um, but I'm building them for fun. I'm not building it for a job. So anyway, so those are just some thoughts that I decided I would come on here and share, talk about some different, different things that, some of the games, the styles of games, and why. And so what I want you guys to do is just, in the comments, what are, like what types of games, or what are some of the games that you play and why? What are the reasons why you play specific types of games? I mean, is it like, like I said, sometimes you're just doing it because, that's really just like, it kind of keeps your mind going. Sometimes it reminds you when you were a kid. Sometimes there could be certain things that, it could have been like some sort of experience when you were exposed to it. It was like something that just kind of triggered, like, oh, this is what I want to do. And then the other thing is, why do you play, why do you play the games? Why do you play games? What is the reason? Why? I'd be curious. I would love to have like a discussion and talk about this, and like we can have, the community can interact with all that kind of stuff. So, but anyways, that's what I wanted to come on here and talk about tonight. And hopefully, if you guys will interact, and we can have this thing further. So, anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'm going to sign off, and I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye. Let's see if I can. I got to figure out how to stop this. There we go. There we go. All right, have a good night, you guys.